الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. The topic of the talk today, I wanted to talk on a subject that's so important for all of us, whether we are still teenagers, adolescents, or even married and older. And that is 3 keys to Islamic parenting. 3 keys to Islamic parenting. There are a lot of guidance to do with Islamic parenting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a lot. But I want to just talk on 3 things that really help to raise kids in a way that they will be a comfort to our eyes and also great slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the kids, as we know, if somebody came and asked me for $1 million or asked you for $1 million, you probably would not give it to anybody except for one, and that is your kids. Isn't that how we are? It's a special relationship with our kids. In fact, from the moment we get married and have children, probably a large part of our lives thereafter is for our children. Because we care about them, we care about their future, we care about their schooling, we care about the job, the career they have, we care about them and sacrifice everything for them. And why would we not? On one hand, many of us, we do that naturally because in old age, hopefully they'll look after us the way we looked after them in young age. But that's just one reason. But the other reason, as Muslims, we look after the kids because once we die, as the Prophet ﷺ informed us, all our good actions come to an end except for 3. And one of those 3 is our children, righteous children that we leave behind who pray for us after we are dead. So it's our children, if we give good guidance to them now, not only do they help us while they're alive, even by just being the comfort and the beauty and the cooling of our eyes, but also after we are dead by praying for us and by doing a lot of other good things where we can continue to get reward as well. And them being a part of us, we care so much about them. Now, as important as kids are, brothers and sisters, as important as kids are, yet we see in our society today that more than at any other time, the kids in our society today, they usually lose the track sometime in the teenage years or adolescent years, isn't it? We see, especially right here in Sydney and even other big cities around the world, like even Melbourne and other big cities, we see that there are a lot of Muslim youth that are, mashallah, tabarakallah, a source of pride and comfort to their parents and to the whole Muslim community. Yet on the other side, we see a lot of Muslim youth involved in crime, involved in self-destructive, hobbies, pastimes, such as, taking illicit, illegal drugs, doing other haram things that are going to harm their life in this world and harm their eternal life as well. We see this everywhere. And for us as parents, I'm a parent, I see a lot of the people here are parents, and a lot of the people are the children today and parents tomorrow. For us, it's a concern. For many of the parents, they probably don't care as much as they should in terms of learning what is the guidance of Allah to do with the kids. For many of the parents, we think it's natural, it's a given that our kids are going to be all right and they're going to all grow up as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu. For a lot of us, we think it's so easy as that to have our kids grow up in that way. And hence, many of us don't put the effort to learn from Islam about these matters. What I'd like to talk about in the next half an hour or so, inshallah, are 3 keys that we learn from Islam about raising great kids. And these 3 keys that we learn from Islam, they're not just from Islam. Raising kids is a concern of whole humanity, Muslims and non-Muslims. So these 3 points that I'm about to mention 2 out of the 3 points are ones which I have read in some of the top researchers and writers around the world, from Muslims and non-Muslims, to do with the topic of parenting. So what are these 3 keys that help us to raise great Islamic kids so we can benefit in our life and eternally in the hereafter, and not just us, our kids especially, so that they benefit and grow up to have a great future, this life and the eternal life? What are these 3 keys? First of these 3 keys. Now, firstly, I'm talking about when our kids are young, and I'm also talking about when our kids are growing older as well. Whether our kids are little kids, like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, or even if they've already become teenagers. Of course, they're not kids, they're teenagers, they're growing up. Whatever age they're at, these 3 keys really help a long way. Especially the first 2 apply to whatever age they're at. The third one, it varies a little bit depending on what age they're at. The first of the 3 points, the way I put it, first of the 3 keys to raising great Islamic kids is connect them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As simple as this might sound, this is probably, in my understanding of raising kids, from what I've learned and read and my own experience of raising 3 kids, this is probably the single most important strategy to raising kids successfully, Islamically. And that is connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do we mean by that? What I mean by that is, let it be in their lives, let it be that the number 1 reason behind everything they do in life, it is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever they do in life, let it be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any decision they make, any thought that comes to their mind, any love they have, any fear they have, or any dislike they have for everything, let it be that the question they have before everything is, hey, what I care the most is, does Allah want me to do it this way? Does Allah want me to do this? Would Allah like me if I did this? Would Allah dislike me if I didn't do this? Now you see, naturally, whether we are Muslims or non-Muslims, for everybody naturally, we care about what other people think. So when we are young, we care about what our parents think. So when we're young, have you seen little kids? Whatever they do, quite often, they look at the parents. Do the parents like what I'm doing? And if they do, they'll go on doing it. What we are trying to do is connect them with Allah, number 1. Connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever I'm doing, first, let it be the concern of my child. What does Allah see this action as? Is Allah going to like me more for doing it? Or it's Allah not going to like me more for doing it? As the kids grow old, they care about their peers, their fellow teenagers, what they think. If their fellow peers at school and elsewhere think that a certain hairstyle is cool, they're going to have that hairstyle. If their peers think that the certain way of dressing is really cool, that's the way they're going to walk out on the street. The kids at that age care about what their peers think about them. What we want to do is, first and foremost, to consider how Allah sees me before my own peers. Connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we go about doing this? The way I suggest going about doing it, and the way I have learned from the Quran and the Hadith as well, is whatever I am doing in my life and they're watching me do, always talk about it, that I'm doing it because Allah will love me more for doing it. And I'm leaving something because if I did it, Allah will be angry with me. So, how do we go about doing it? And a great example, Prophet Luqman. Some said he's a prophet, some said he's not. Luqman the wise in the Quran, Allah relates about him in Surah Luqman how he dealt with his son, how he spoke to his son. And wallahi, brothers and sisters, this little passage, the way Luqman dealt with his son, all my 3 keys to great Islamic parenting are there in these verses. And wallahi, I have read literally hundreds of pages about parenting from some of the leading non-Muslim authors in the world today. And I've attended and been trained to be an educator and so on for some of the leading researchers of parenting in the world. And I find that whatever I've learned, better than that, whatever wisdom they have, and better than that is there in these verses in Surah Luqman and elsewhere in the Quran and the Hadith of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Just so you can go back and look at these verses yourself. These verses are in Surah Luqman, which is Surah number 31 in the Quran. And the verses in Surah Luqman, let's say the verses that I'm going to specifically focus on, I guess the verses start from 14 to 19. Verses 14 to 19 of Surah Luqman, all these strategies, you will find them in there. And wallahi, the greatest that any non-Muslim or researcher or Muslim researcher, that they've come through their other studies, these verses have most of that here, and the rest of the Quran, the Hadith has everything and more than what you will find. Let's look at the first one, connecting with Allah. Look at the way Luqman speaks to his son. In verse number, let me see, what's the verse number here? In verse number 16. In verse number 16, Luqman says to his son, he says, Ya bunayya, in taku mithqala habbatin min khardalin fi sakhratin, aw fi samawati aw fil ardi, ya'ti biha Allah, inna Allaha latifun khabir. Let's reflect on this verse. He says, O my son, Ya bunayya, O my son, if there was a mustard seed, if there was the weight of a mustard seed, and you know how small the mustard seed is, if there was the weight of a mustard seed in the rocks, hidden somewhere inside the rock, or in the heavens, in the skies, you know how big the skies are, my dear brothers and sisters. He's saying if there was a weight of a mustard seed in the rocks or somewhere in the skies or in the earth, Allah will come with that. Allah will bring it. Meaning on the day of judgment, Allah will bring it. Nothing's going to hide from Allah. He knows everything. And in the end of the verse, Luqman says, Inna Allaha latifun khabir. Because verily Allah is subtle and fully aware of everything. Latif meaning everything, small and big, even the most discreet things, Allah is aware of that. So notice, brothers and sisters, in this verse, Luqman is saying to his son, O my son, if there was the weight of a mustard seed hidden in the rocks or the heavens or the earth, Allah will bring it. Meaning Allah is aware of everything. So Luqman is saying to his son, don't do something bad thinking you'll hide from Allah. Let's just quickly reflect on this verse. Luqman says to his son, if there is the weight of a mustard seed anywhere in the rock or the skies or the earth, Allah will bring it because He is Latif and Khabir, because He knows everything small and He's aware of everything. Notice how Luqman says to his son to be aware of whatever you do, don't do anything wrong because Allah is watching it, and he finishes it off by saying that Allah is aware of everything. Notice that whenever he says to his son to do something, he connects his son with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine if I said to my son, son, don't do this, because if I found out you did that, then you are going to be grounded. Now then, if the son thinks that, okay, my dad can't see it, he'll do it. He can do it. But if you say that Allah is aware of everything, now he will never do that, because he knows that Allah will watch him everywhere. Look at just the one more verse after that. Luqman says to his son again, he says, وَلَا تُصَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. He says to his son, he says, do not turn your face away from the people in arrogance, nor walk on the earth in show-off way, in arrogant way. And why? He finishes the verse by saying, because verily Allah does not like people who are exultant and boastful show-offs. Notice, Luqman tells his son, don't be arrogant, and immediately he tells him, because Allah doesn't like arrogant people. Now, if I said to my son, don't be arrogant because your dad doesn't like it, later if he wanted to be, when dad is not watching, he'll do it. But if I say, don't do it because Allah doesn't like it, then he knows Allah's always watching him, and he's always connected to Allah wherever he's walking on earth, and he will be mindful of what to do. And another benefit of that is, when you connect him to Allah, Allah is the greatest power. So then later on, when he becomes a teenager and his peer group becomes the most important thing to him in his life, because they seem ever present everywhere, they seem to be the ones who can make or break his future, his peer groups. At that time, kids, when they're teenagers, don't care much about the parents anymore, because they think that their peers are the ones who are going to make or break for them after that. And the parents are getting old. But when you connect them with the love of Allah and the fear of Allah, then the love of Allah and the fear of Allah will be even more than their peer group or their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their husband or their wife. So when you connect them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are making Allah the most important in their life for the rest of their life. And nobody will ever be able to compete with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I made them obsessed with me, tomorrow I'll be old and frail, and there'll be others better than me or stronger than me. Do you see the point? So we're connecting them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll give you an example. And actually before that, when I connect them to Allah, I'm giving them the number one reason of what you should keep in mind every time you do something. Because if they're doing something for me, they might think, hey, I'm doing it for my old man, you know? I'm doing it for my mum. Okay, all right, I owe something to them, but I don't owe everything to them. But when I always relate them to Allah, then everything I owe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some of the reasons why. And I'll give you I'll give you an example and you can see how. What Luqman is doing there and what we do is, our son and daughter sees to us whenever dad does something, whenever mum does something, my God, you know, I'm a little kid, and you know, to little kids, do you remember when you were a little kid, mum and dad seemed like they're as tall as the sky, right? And they think that you are so big. And when they grow older and taller than you, then you become, you know, much smaller. But Allah is always the Almighty for them. But when the kids are young and they see dad and mum so tall, and whatever they do, they say, son, do you know why I did that? I did it because Allah ordered me to do it. And they're like, wow, my dad is like the toughest man I know, but whatever he does it for Allah. That means there's somebody stronger than my dad, and that's Allah. And whatever my dad does, he does for Allah. Man, I better do whatever I do for the sake of Allah, because my own dad does it for the sake of Allah. You see, there are so many benefits of this parenting exact key that we learn from Surah Luqman and elsewhere. And I'll give you an example of that. One brother said to me recently, he's got a son who's like less than 7 years old. You know, I can't remember, 4, 5, 6 or 7 year old son. And you know how it is, right? When the kids are young, you know, they listen to you. When they get older and older, they stop listening to you if you don't follow these Islamic advice. So then this brother said his son, who is less than 7 years old, I can't remember, 4, 5 or 6 years old, he said as his son was growing older, he wouldn't listen to anything that dad is saying as much as he can get away with it. He would say to his son one thing and the son would do another thing. And eventually the brother said, you know, this is what's happening every time, and the son is only 4, 5 or 6 years old. Imagine what's going to be when he grows older. Dad says something and the son doesn't do it, he does another thing. It's the way the dad said to me, it's as though I don't even exist. As though I'm talking to a wall, as though I'm talking to something invisible. Dad is not even there. That little boy at this age has already developed this phenomenon of not listening to dad. And then the dad said to me that one day, he was just so, like amazed and frustrated that my son just doesn't listen to anything I say. So he said to his son, as I said, little son, 5 years, 6 years, he said to him, he called his name, but I'm not going to mention his name. He said, "Oh, my son, why is it that every time I tell you to do something, you just can't be bothered and you don't do it? Don't you realize that I'm telling you to do this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Don't you realize that one day you're going to be dead? And then it's going to be the day of judgment. And Allah's going to ask you about everything you're doing. Don't you realize this is your only life you have to avoid the hellfire? And after that, it's going to be the day of judgment in hell or paradise. Whatever I say to you, my son, I'm only saying to you for the sake of Allah." And wallahi, brothers and sisters, these were words like magic. These were words like magic. And wallahi, and I'm not lying, that father told me that moment onwards, not even the next day, that moment onwards, he said his son looked at him as though a revelation came upon him. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, he said his son looked at him as though it was something ajib and ghareeb and amazing. And he said the son looked at him like that for a short time. And wallahi, the brother said, after that, whenever the dad tells him, the son is now responsive and he does it. Whenever the dad says something, his son now began doing it. The son was a different person after that. A totally different person. What made that different? Connecting the son to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before anybody else, as the reason for doing whatever we do. So how else can we do that in our life? If I'm in the shop and I have to give some money to the shopkeeper, I give the money honestly. I say to my son, son, I'm giving the money to them exactly, even though they might not know, because Allah ordered us to be honest, and Allah loves the people who do it. And if there's something wrong I can do and I don't do it, I say, son, the reason I'm not doing it, or daughter, the reason I'm not doing it is because Allah does not like the people who do wrong, and they might be punished in hellfire. So every time we do something, we connect it. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, if you do this one thing, you will find that later on, when the peer group pressure comes, your children will know that Allah is more almighty and more reason to listen to than anybody else. And then when your children become 18, 19, 20, 21, they're not going to be at King's Cross doing drugs, but they're going to be at a mosque or an Islamic center doing good deeds. And this is the first and most important key. And let's move on to the second of the three keys. The second of the three keys that helps us to do Islamic parenting to our kids, to make sure that they we successfully raise them, is to connect them in a bond of love between us and them, parent and child. The second key is the bond of love between the parent and the child. Once again, we learn this, but let's first make it clear what we're talking about. Is some people think that the relationship I should have with my kid is the relationship where when I walk into the room, my kids, out of fear, they shiver and shudder out of their fear towards me. That's not necessarily the thing that's going to help us, especially in today's time. Because later on, when we become older and the kids become bigger and taller than us and stronger, that fear is going to dissipate. But what will help is that relationship and bond of love between us and the children. So how do we go about doing it? In many ways. But first, let's look at the verses in the Quran which teach us about building this love, relationship of love between mum and dad on one hand, and the boys and girl, our daughter and son on the other hand. How do we learn that? The same verses I read from Surah Luqman. Notice how Luqman talks to his son by saying, Ya Bunayya. He says, Ya Bunayya, oh my little son. You know, in Arabic, the word Bunayya is tasghir. In Arabic, you know, ibn or ibni is what you say normally. And bunayya is the sighatu tasghir. It is, the tasghir means to denote that something is very small. So then a parent can say to the child, Ya ibni, Ya ibni, oh my son, do this. Or the parent can say to the child with even more love by using the sighatu tasghir, the sigha of denoting something little and cute, by saying Ya bunayya, oh my little son. So this sigha in Arabic, this way of saying in Arabic, is a way of love. Is a way of love towards the little children. And hence Luqman says to his child, Ya bunayya, instead of saying Ya bani, or by his name. This, my dear brothers, shows to us how Luqman was developing that love. Even the way he talks is the language of love. Ya bunayya. So when we talk to our children with love, mercy, care, compassion, when we talk to them like that, they see that my mom and my dad, they're not here to harm me. They're not here to take out their anger on me. They're here because they love me. They're here because they love me. This doesn't mean that you don't discipline them. No, that's wrong. At time of discipline, you do discipline them. But one thing you realize about kids, how many of you have kids here? Yep. Okay, most of us. The rest of you who don't have kids, I guess you're not married, yeah? Or you're recently married. But let's pray you have about 10, 15 kids, inshallah. Right? Because the Prophet encouraged us to have lots of kids. Right? The Prophet encouraged us to have lots of kids. So inshallah, pray that you all have kids. Pray I have about 15 as well, inshallah. So moving on, with our children, it doesn't mean we don't discipline them. Those of you who have kids, right? You can discipline your children now, one moment. One moment you can discipline your children strictly and be strict with them. And then just give them 30 seconds after that. They will smile, come and hug you. They'll forget all of that. It's not that they've forgotten the disciplining, but they still have that love with you. That's the way Allah made it. You can discipline them respectfully one moment and be strict with them, but a few moments later, they will be back with you, hugging you, kissing you, and just, absolutely connected with you. Have you noticed that? Those of you who are parents, I'm sure you've noticed it. I can see smiles in the eyes of some of you. You can see it with your kids. This is a special relationship that Allah has created. So on one hand, we be strict and disciplinarian when we need to be in a way that I'll talk about in the third key. But on the other hand, we want the overriding relationship between us and our children to be a relationship of love and care. That bond. So whenever you talk to them, talk gently and nicely. Don't take out your anger on your kids. Don't take out your anger on your kids. And wallahi, brothers and sisters, let me ask you, which one of you is a perfect human being, perfect parent, and a perfect Muslim? Is there anybody here? Okay, nobody, right? And neither am I, nor are you. So sometimes we do things that are not the best way to go. Sometimes we might get angry. And our kids see, oh, did you see? Dad got angry. So then you don't try to brush it away and make an excuse saying, Dad wasn't really angry. It was just that you heard it that way, son. So you don't have to make excuses. Just tell them the reason. Tell them that, look, Dad wants to do the best thing. Mom wants to do the best thing that Allah likes. But I'm a human being. And sometimes I make a mistake, oh son, oh daughter. And may Allah forgive me. I don't want Allah to punish me. May Allah forgive me. By saying this, your children see that you still humble to Allah. You're not arrogant, but you're humble to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you say it. Remember, I said, don't make an excuse for why you did something wrong in front of your kids, but just give them the reason. Give them the reason. Don't make an excuse, give them a reason. As one brother said to me, his father was in jail and he was in trouble with the police at one time. And this brother said to me that his father, I know that this brother has a lot of anger. And he said his father has even more anger. Anger where there'll be an earthquake of 10 Richter scale, right? His father has such an anger and was in jail, and the son took a lot of the anger or some of the anger and got in trouble with the police as well because of his anger. And this brother told me that his dad told him when he was young, growing older, his dad said to him, subhanallah, this is one of the wisdom, subhanallah, one of the wisdom. His dad said to him one day, he said, son, I do get angry from time to time, and I get very angry. And you know how angry I get. But it's not good to get angry. And when you are young, when you are my age, it's hard to get rid of that anger. I try, but I don't succeed totally at my age. But at your age, oh son or daughter, at your age, it is much easier to get over the anger and learn to suppress your anger and learn to control your anger. This is what the dad told the son, and the son said it helped him so much to get rid of that anger that he grew up with, seeing his dad be so angry person as well. What did the dad do? He made no excuses to get away, saying, oh, I'm just angry because, I've got some chemicals inside my body and those chemicals made me angry. Otherwise, I'm really an angel. That is just these chemicals that made me angry, son. No, that's called an excuse. He just gave him a reason. Oh, son, I get angry. It's not right. And you are still young and it's time for you to overcome that. This is, be honest with them and add to it the key number one, connect them with Allah and say, son, when I'm angry, I feel afraid of Allah that I might get hellfire. And I feel ashamed that I have disobeyed Allah. But I keep trying to do the best I can. So you're connecting them to Allah, key number one, and you're building your bond with them of love and care and concern. So that is key number two. And as I said in this surah of Luqman alayhi salam in these verses, look at it. 3 verses on that one page, Luqman keeps saying to his son, Ya bunayya, Ya bunayya, Ya bunayya. Oh my little son, oh my lovely little son. So this is the way we talk to our daughter and son. If you get angry, say to them that, look, may Allah forgive me, etc., as we just spoke. So the second thing that I said is that try to build a relationship of love and care. Do discipline them, but love and care is the way it should normally be. So always show to your children. Now about love and care, it's good to give gifts to your children to show love to them. Because the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? He said, Tahadaw, tahabu. He said, give gifts to one another and make love between each other. Give gifts to love one another and grow in love between each other. So giving gifts helps to make love. It helps to build love and grow love. So with your children, give them gifts now and then. But don't spoil them to the extent where there's a lot of problem with giving too many gifts. One of the problems of giving too many gifts is you don't want them to develop a mentality where they think that the way to show love is by giving gifts, and tomorrow that daughter gets married to a husband, and when the husband doesn't give her flowers or gifts in a certain week, she feels that the husband doesn't love her anymore. Because the only way she knows to receive love or recognize love is through gifts. So you don't want to go too much overboard, but vary the way you show your love to your children. Another way you can show love to your children is hug them, kiss them. That's another way to show love. Remember the Prophet ﷺ, when he would come back from a long journey, what would he do? One of the first things when he came back from a long journey, he would kiss the forehead of his daughter Fatima, radiallahu anha. He would kiss the forehead of his daughter Fatima. That connection builds love, my dear brothers. A thing that I mention to people all the time is when I was in year 10 doing work experience at a chemist shop in Melbourne, at a pharmacy, the lady who was my supervisor mentioned to me, she was teaching me how to be a good pharmacist or, so on. So one of the things she said to me is, she said, when you give money to the people, people give you money, you return the change. When you return the change, don't just put it in the hand, put the money and touch their hand a little bit with the money. Touch their hand a little bit, the palm of their hand, with your tips of your finger a little bit. Because she said that in a course that she attended about marketing and sales, they said that they did research and they noticed that by that little bit of touch, it creates a sensation, a feeling of love and affection, or just a little bit of nice feelings towards you. So she was saying, touch them like that. And that's why, can you see that in Islam it makes a lot of sense that the Prophet ﷺ told us that if any man touches a woman, of course a woman who's not mahram to her, touches a woman, then it is better for him to be pierced in the head with an iron nail. Meaning, don't go and shaking hands or touching or caressing or touching, etc. to women who you are not mahram to them. One of the reasons is, like we just saw, it develops that love and affection, or if not love and affection with just a little handshake, but just a little nice feeling towards the other person, which if the other person is in that moment of depression, etc., it might go further in the future and so on. But coming back to what we were talking about, the Prophet used to kiss his wife's forehead when he came home to express his love and build the love and that relationship of love. So with our kids as well, love them, hug them, kiss them, etc. And remember that man, one of the men, the Prophet, one of the tribal leaders came to the Prophet, and when somebody kissed a child, that tribal leader said, I have 10 children, I have never kissed any one of them. I have 10 children, I've never kissed any one of them. So the Prophet ﷺ replied to him by saying, Man la yarham, la yurham. Whoever doesn't show mercy is not shown mercy to. Subhanallah. So this shows that tribal leader, he was a leader. So he thought that being a leader means you should be tough, mean, etc. But the Prophet showed to him that there's a time to be tough and there's a time to kiss and hug and love. And even in toughness, you can still show the love as well. But anyway, I won't drag on more about this, but the point is that you can show love to your children by just hugging them, saying nice things to them, giving them gifts, etc., and things such as that, without going overboard about things like that. Let's now move on to the last and the third keys. I've actually got another talk I do, which is 7 keys of Islamic parenting. But this time we'll do 3 keys, inshallah, not to drag on too long. The third and the last key I want to talk about now is called, actually, the third key is, the third key is the way you speak to your kids, speak to them, deal with, the third key, deal with your kids in an authoritative manner. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, this is one of the most important advice, and Allah knows best if I've made a mistake. But this is what I've understood from what I've read from some of the leading non-Muslim parenting experts, and what I've understood from Islam after my studies in the Islamic University of Medina and all my other Islamic studies. This is what I've understood, right? That some parents say, some writers amongst the non-Muslims say, when you're talking to your kids, be authoritarian, just give them the whip. That's not the way. Being authoritarian is different to being authoritative. Authoritarian means you bring down the whip on the kids. Whatever I say is the way it has to be. No questions asked. What I say, you do it in the minute, in the second I tell you. That's authoritarian, and that's not the way to go. But the way to go that I'm recommending, which I understood from the Prophet ﷺ, is the authoritative way. And that means that you are, that it is clear between you and the kids that you are the one with the authority, and whatever you say, it's from wisdom and knowledge and care and concern and love. So then I have this authority as a father or a mother, and you are my son or a daughter, whatever I say to you, I'm saying it with authority on one hand, and yet with love, care and gentleness and wisdom and knowledge and experience of life on the other hand. This is being authoritative. Not authoritarian, but authoritative. Some people go to the opposite extreme. Some are authoritarians, some are they use other words for it, go to the opposite extreme, where they say, with me and my kids, we're going to take a vote. Son and daughter, what are we going to do? Let's take a vote. It's okay sometimes to do that in order to teach them something when they're a bit older, but in important matters, that's not the way. When they're young, 4, 5, 6 years old, you're not going to say to a 4-year-old, let's have a vote. At least I've never seen the Prophet ﷺ do that, and the Prophet was the greatest in any guidance to do with humanity. And he never did that, take a vote with kids. But what the Prophet did is what I'm talking about, is the authoritative way, not one extreme nor the authoritarian extreme. So then, what is the authoritative way? Authoritative way is when I'm speaking to my son or my daughter. Let's say my son or my daughter in front of me, and I'm talking to them. I don't beg them on one hand and say, let's say, what's my son's name? My son's name is, for example, Ismail. Ismail is my oldest son's name, right? Not example, it is. That's my oldest son's name. So I don't say, and wallahi, brothers and sisters, this is so important, this point. And I hope that you will, if you don't take anything from me, then take this. Although the first point was the most important, but still this is very important. I see Muslim parents. In the mosque, on the streets, and I see non-Muslim parents. What do they do with their kids? How do they talk to them? They yell at them. They yell at them and they scream at them. And they talk to them with disrespect, and they talk to them in a way where the kids feel embarrassed in front of the public, and they might even dislike you as a parent. This is how many parents behave with their kids. So this point is very important. If this is my son Ismail, and I'm talking to him authoritatively, with gentleness and love and care and concern. So if I want my son to do something, I'm not going to say, Ismail, can you go and do this, please? Come on, go and do this. Come on, Ismail, please do this. If you do it, I'm going to buy you a Mars bar or Snickers or Crunchy or whatever chocolate it is, or ice cream. So I'm now, bribing them, and I'm begging them. This is not the way, according to the research I've read and according to the way I've seen and learned from the Prophet ﷺ. Don't beg them, and don't say, if you do this, I'll do this, conditionally. Reward them, it's okay, but not that you do it conditional that I will give you this in return. That's one extreme. The other way, of course, is authoritarian way. You tell them off with no respect at all. That's not the way. The way I recommend, the way I learned from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and these verses of Luqman, Surah Luqman, is I'll say to Ismail, I would say, Ismail, I would look at him gently, yet authoritatively. And I would say, Ismail, I would like you, or I might say, Ismail, take this and put it in the bedroom. Or I might say, of course, one of my things, besides Islamic things, I'm also a dentist. So the other thing is, I might say, Ismail, it's time to sleep. So go and brush your teeth now. Notice I'm saying it gently. I'm saying it with respect. I'm saying it with love. But I'm saying it authoritatively, expecting to be listened to and obeyed. Gently, with love, authoritatively, expecting that my son will do it. Not like, oh, Ismail, can you go and brush your teeth? Please go and brush your teeth. If you brush your teeth, I'll give you a lolly. Not tonight, but tomorrow morning, I'll give you a lolly. No, I say, Ismail, it's time to go to sleep now. So go and brush your teeth and then go to sleep. See, it's not an authoritarian way. It's not a begging way. It's in between. Hence, you see the Prophet ﷺ, one of the kids that the Prophet ﷺ raised at their young age was a 9-year-old girl. Her name was Aisha radiallahu anha. How did the Prophet ﷺ talk to her? When she was in her house, and when he stepped out of the house, it was the masjid, and he wanted to say to Aisha radiallahu anha to get a little piece of cloth from the masjid. He said to Aisha, He didn't say, oh Aisha, please go to the masjid, oh please go and get the cloth for me. Oh. No, he didn't do that. What did he say? And he didn't say, Aisha, go and get the cloth. You know, he didn't do that either. What did he do? He said, Nawilini al-khumra. Nawilini al-khumra. In Arabic, Nawilini is fi'al amr. It is a command. But he didn't say it in a commanding, condescending, putting down way. No. Meaning, he didn't beg. He simply said, Nawilini al-khumra. You know, he said, get me the cloth. Get me the cloth. This is the authoritative way, assertive way that is to talk. Gently, with love, respect, authoritatively, and so on. This is how we learn the Prophet ﷺ talk. And even in Surah Luqman, one of the things we learned in Surah Luqman is how does Luqman a.s. talk to his son? He says, Ya bunayya, O my son, Ya bunayya, أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانهى عن المنكر واصبر على ما أصابك. He says, O my son, establish the prayer. Command number one, but beautifully, nicely with love. O my son, establish the prayer. Order others, enjoin good and forbid wrong, and have patience. 4 fi'l amr, 4 verbs of command, one after the other, but gently. Why? Gently with love. Because before that he said, Ya bunayya, oh my little lovely son, oh my little son, with love. So you have the love, but in an authoritative way. The son knows that this is mom, this is dad. And yet the son knows and the daughter knows that they love me, they care about me, and whatever they're telling me is for my own good. So this is the way of Luqman, and we saw the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and we saw the way many amongst us scream on to our kids. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, if you scream at your kids when they're young, they will grow up screaming at their own kids and others as well. They will hurt their wives, their husbands, their children. They will hurt maybe one day you if they scream at you at old age. But as we said before, talk to them in this authoritative way, gentle with love. And as they grow older, the authoritative way with gentleness and love starts to have more of a guiding way. So then as they get older, you start explaining to them the wisdom. You don't explain to them the reason why they should listen to you, but you explain to them the wisdom in what you're saying. So they grow in wisdom, and at the same time, you continue that way as well. So with this, I want to bring my talk to an end. These were the 3 keys that we looked at. Number 1 was develop connection. Number 1 was connect them with Allah. Number 2 was bond of love between you and them. And number 3 was deal with them. Your dealing and speaking, make it in an authoritative way with gentleness and love. Authoritative on one hand, gentleness and love. Not authoritarian, nor the other way where they lose respect for you, but in this manner. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps to raise our children in the best of the manner. I pray that our children will grow up to be a cooling and comfort to our eyes in this world and a source of reward in paradise. And I pray that our children will be the best Muslims for the next generation of humanity as a blessing for them. And I thank Allah and I praise Allah for this incredible guidance of Islam, where even things such as parenting, Allah has so much guidance in the Quran and the authentic hadith of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum. These things that I'm talking about, we have 2 mailing lists. I would really recommend you to join those mailing lists, because as I said about parenting and marriage relationship, I've read literally thousands of pages on this, attended training courses by some of the best people in the world, Muslim and non-Muslims. And I want others to benefit from this. We have 2 mailing lists. I would really recommend you to join those mailing lists. And then when the email goes to the spam or junk mail, put it in the proper folder as well. And those 2 mailing lists, number 1 is called hikmahway.com, HIKMAHWAY.com. That's where we advertise the courses we do. The other one is called imannest.com, IMANNEST.com, imannest.com. Please join the mailing list called Iman Nest Tips on there, where I try to send regular emails to the people so that these kind of tips and other things. And when I do a khutbah or a talk somewhere, I try to send it there as well, or a link to it, so that people benefit. One day when the brother, if the brother does this talk and I can get a hand on it, I'll send it or a link to it on there as well, and other things as well. So all the hours I spend, attending those courses on parenting and marriage, and the things I've learned, throughout thousands of pages, hopefully you can benefit all of that for free on our mailing list at imannest.com and hikmahway.com. And if you see other people who've got kids or wives or husbands where they want to improve their relationship, let them know about it as well. These are general Islamic mailing lists, but at the same time they might benefit something as well. So Jazakumullah khairan. Hope to inshallah keep in touch with you through the mailing list. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah khairan.